All right, so we're gonna pick up and look at a story from Mark chapter 4. The question for this second half of or the second part of our night is our pattern. Is we're going to say, so if you were a first century Jew looking at Jesus, how might Jesus have reminded you of this story? So if you were looking for a new Exodus, how would Jesus' story, Jesus' life, have made you think of the Exodus and make you think, hey, maybe this is the new Exodus. Maybe this is what we're looking for. So with that, and here's the new slide. I'll remember this for Rick as much as I can. We are in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. There are parallel stories of this, similar stories in Matthew 8 and Luke 8, but I decided to stay with Mark because we've been going through Mark on Sunday mornings, or at least following Mark's outline, and this might tie into something that we already talked about on a Sunday morning recently. It might not. We'll see. Somebody read that Mark passage for us.
That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him."
All right. So here, this slide is a highly realistic picture of Jesus in the boat. All right. So this story follows right after Jesus' teaching in Mark chapter 4. Jesus calms a storm, and I suspect just goes back to sleep while his disciples freak out. And they ask each other a question: who is this guy, and how did he do that? Right? What is happening here? I notice also that Jesus asks his disciples why they're afraid if they don't have any faith. Sort of like Moses said, don't be afraid, stand still, be still, trust God to get you out of this. Jesus says, well, why are you afraid? Don't you have faith yet? But the Old Testament gives us some potential answers to who is this guy, and they're answers that tie back to the Exodus story. First, you could think that, remember, Moses parted the sea, he waves, and the wind comes up, right? Here, Jesus tells the wind to be still, and it stops. So there's in some sense command over the wind and the waves. I did notice that these waves were coming over the boat, sort of like over your pontoon boat. Yeah. Moses parts the sea because the wind blows it back. Here Jesus tells the wind to be still, it does. Or in Joshua, think about the story of Joshua taking the people into the promised land. Remember, Moses gets the people there, doesn't get to go in. Joshua leads them in. When they're going into the land, they cross the Jordan River, and Joshua stops the flowing of the Jordan River so that the people can cross on dry land across the river. something like what Moses does in the Exodus story, or perhaps even Yahweh. I gave you some text from Psalm 106, which includes a retelling of the Exodus story, but I'm just going to talk briefly about Psalm 107 instead. Because in Psalm 107, we're told two things. We're told that Yahweh commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted the waves of the sea. We're also told that he made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. So, like many of the Psalms, we get this image of God having the ability to control weather. Sometimes I wish God would just make every day like it is in San Diego. Right? You know, that is so gorgeous. At one point, I had a client who had an office not far from the beach in San Diego, and I always tried to figure out how many days in a row I could have to work there. You know, how many days in a row could I spend here? Maybe I could just, stay at a hotel nearby and camp out for the week. It's just gorgeous down there. This also might remind you of the creation story, where the Ruach of God, the wind, the breath, the Spirit blows over the waters and brings order to creation. And like many of Jesus' miracles or signs, mighty deeds of power, some people call them, they wouldn't be seen as displays of power for its own sake. But people of first century Israel would have seen this as evidence that God is coming in power to save God's people, or as a new Exodus, as we might say. Jesus shows power over the natural order, just as we saw in the Exodus story. And Jesus brings it into harmony with itself and harmony with God's saving purposes. So the people could have seen Jesus as a prophet like Moses or a prophet like Joshua, or they could actually have seen Jesus as the coming of Yahweh himself, or the coming of the King. And with that, we're going to go to the discussion questions again. Do that second set of discussion questions.